Crews in hazmat suits are seen.
Police officers and explosive-sniffing dogs.
Ricin.
A poison letter.
Federal authorities say they have arrested a Mississippi man for sending letters laced with ricin to President Obama.
I don't even eat rice usually, I'm not even a rice lover.
Sometimes honor compels men to lock themselves into a conflict to which there can be no end. Some beef can never be resolved, and some men cannot coexist. In 21st century America, there aren't many true samurai left. This is the story of two men in Tupelo, Mississippi, who answered to a code higher than the American legal system. Some feuds have no beginning and no end. They simply always have been. Battles across space and time incarnating in thousands of lives until the death of the universe. For these two men, Tupelo, Mississippi was not a town, but a theater in which they could stage their timeless, boundless struggle. The victims caught in the crossfire of their titanic clash would include judges, senators, warriors, lawyers, insurance agents, celebrity impersonators, and even President Barack Obama. To tell the story of Paul Kevin Curtis, you might begin on December 17th, 1999. Curtis was a pretty well-known Elvis impersonator, and in Tupelo, the hometown of Elvis Presley, that was one of the most honorable things a man could be. But even with the success of his performance career and his undeniable singing ability, he needed to supplement his income, so he worked days as a janitor at the North Mississippi Medical Center. On that fateful December day, he'd been assigned to clean a part of the hospital he'd never been in before, the morgue. He spent hours cleaning up a messy scene and he was parched, but he was hesitant to walk back across the floor he'd just cleaned, so instead he just checked a nearby fridge, hoping for the relief of an ice-cold Dr. Pepper, but was instead greeted with the horrifying sight of a mass of amputated limbs. No sodas at all, only head in the freezer, arms and legs, little penis in the butter dish. He fled the scene and told everyone who would listen the horrors he'd seen. To some, it was not such a strange idea that there might be body parts in a morgue fridge. But to Kevin Curtis, it was evidence of a limb and organ black market. Curtis's paranoia grew when, a few days later, he was fired for trespassing. Out of work, he now had all of his time to focus on his Elvis career and on leading the crusade against the body part black market. The manic intensity of his bipolar disorder gave way to catatonic lows, and his career and personal life suffered. On stage at the Tupelo Elvis Festival, he raved about his conspiracy theory, and it was hard for him to get gigs after that. In 2003, he assaulted a local lawyer in a parking lot, and Judge Sadie Holland sentenced him to 6 months in jail. To Curtis, it was no surprise. Judge Holland and her son, State Representative Steve Holland, were morgue owners. Just two more cogs in the mortuary industrial complex. Of course they needed to get him out of the picture. In the following years, his obsession landed him in jail more than a dozen times, and his wife left him. It was his crusade against the body snatchers that first brought him into contact with James Everett Dusky in 2007. Dusky was a wearer of various hats. A political candidate, a sensei at a local dojo, a blues musician, an insurance salesman, a Mensa member, and the editor of a salacious newspaper that promised to publish any story, no matter how scandalous. Dusky worked at an insurance agency managed by Curtis's older brother, where Curtis's ex-wife also worked. Curtis heard about Dusky's newspaper and asked if he'd run his story about the morgue. Dusky, who was in the midst of running for state representative, said he wouldn't run it because it was ridiculous and it would ruin his campaign. Dusky, who was generally a prick and condescended to Southern natives, mocked Curtis and said he never wanted to speak to him again. And so, just like that, a conflict that was born in the fires of the Big Bang reawakened deep in the heart of Mississippi. In many ways, the two men mirrored each other. Both practiced Taekwondo and were trained in fighting with nunchucks. Dusky had his band, Dusty and the Robo-Drum, and they aspired to the kind of stage success that Curtis had as an Elvis performer. Both were obsessive, with Curtis outletting his energy into conspiracy theories and Dusky putting it into vitriolic political attacks on opponents. Both were fiercely idealistic, holding honor above all else. They did not shy away from conflict, and when they made enemies, it was for life. In a way, they spent their whole lives looking for each other, and for a few years, they completed each other. Until the day came when the rivalry finally boiled over, and one of them found himself locked in prison for decades. Dusky lost badly in his election in 2007. He was defeated by incumbent Steve Holland, the son of Sadie Holland, the judge who'd put Curtis away back in '03. The next year, he switched parties, ran for election commissioner, and lost just as badly. After that, with his White House aspirations pretty thoroughly dashed, he walked away from politics. Instead, he leaned into his two vocations, selling insurance and teaching martial arts. He made for an odd sight in Tupelo, always wearing his pinstripe suit, pulling his Mensa card on anybody who challenged him. But I'm not sure that he stuck out more than his nemesis, the Elvis impersonator who wouldn't shut up about a vague conspiracy to sell human limbs and organs. At the insurance agency, Dusky was getting a little bit too comfortable with Curtis's ex-wife, but that never went anywhere because she found him to be unpleasantly short and hairy. In those years, their beef mostly resided online, trading barbs on MySpace and GeoCities and YouTube. The mutually obsessed men both accused the other of cyberstalking, but things finally heated up when, aiming to bait a response from Dusky, Curtis crossed the fucking line. He photoshopped a Mensa certificate for himself and put it on his MySpace page. Right on cue, within hours, Dusky responded.
Kevin, I have put up with your lies silently for a long time, but this one I cannot abide. I am an officer in Mensa. Kevin, of this I am certain you are aware. We keep very good records of who is and who is not a Mensa member. I am giving you 1 day to remove your fraudulent claims from your website. This claim is no laughing matter. This is a serious fraud. 1 day is all you have. Kevin, just 1 day.
See, this is what being a man is all about. Get that fraudulent fucking Mensa certificate off your MySpace page now, or come see me in my dojo. Most of us live in a world of petty barbs, passive aggression, and civil litigation, but there's still a few living in our midst who practice the ways of the warrior. In past lives, these two probably crossed blades in the Persian Wars, Edo Japan, and the Mongol conquests. Now in the 21st century, as a sensei and an Elvis impersonator, they met once more. Accounts differ of the events that followed. We know that Curtis did not remove the Mensa certificate from his MySpace page. We know that Dusky's final email to Curtis read, quote, "Come back tomorrow and the results of you being splattered all over the pavement will be public for the world to see what a fucking coward you are. I will meet you at my school at 1 p.m. and we can finish this once and for all." Of the incident, Curtis would later say, "That's just part of the code. This kind of thing happens all the time. But for reasons lost to history, the fight never transpired." According to Curtis, he arrived and Dusky was gone, and according to Dusky, Curtis never showed up. Chalk it up to a logistical failure, and we're all fortunate. Had they clashed, the state of Mississippi and likely all of North America would have been forever changed. There is something about J. Everett Dusky that, up to now, I have neglected to tell you. He is a major league pervert, and he likes to stand in the front window of his house, butt naked, and shine a green laser at passersby of all ages and make them look at his naked butt. In the summer of 2012, he was charged for indecent exposure, and more charges soon followed. He was looking at a lot of jail time, and his rival was all over MySpace, trumpeting the downfall of his nemesis to anybody who would listen. J. Everett Dusky was most bad things that a person could be. But he lived by a code, and he wasn't going to let his enemy humiliate him without one last fight. That's when he concocted a Hail Mary scheme to ruin Curtis's life. It's hard to understand why exactly these two men hated each other this much. Lots of the primary evidence of their online beef is lost to time, and when they were asked about why they felt so strongly, they were both pretty dodgy about it. Both guys said, "That other guy's nuts, he's obsessed with me, he won't leave me alone." But just why it went so deep was never really obvious to outsiders. You might say that they were just two bored, angry guys in Tupelo, but to me it's bigger than that. They were two star-crossed haters destined to clash, and peace was never an option. The online shit-talking was heavy. Just look at the kind of heat Curtis is laying down on this Taekwondo forum. Dusky was stalking me. I asked him to meet me. He got scared. His music sucks. He's evil. He doesn't respect the forums. He is a child molester. This is Kevin Curtis, and I approve this message. I mean, this was some serious shit. Once the forum disrespecter allegations start flying, there can never be peace. Curtis was a generally erratic and unstable individual, and the things he said online had already raised plenty of eyebrows. It wouldn't be so far-fetched for him to do something truly crazy. On April 16, 2013, Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi received an envelope with a strange odor. Inside was a letter that read, quote, "No one wanted to listen to me before. Maybe I have your attention now, even if it means that someone must die. This must stop. To see a wrong and not expose it is to become a silent partner in its continuance. I am KC and I approve this message." The next day, similar envelopes were received by the offices of President Barack Obama and Judge Sadie Holland. The strange odor was determined to be due to the presence of ricin, a potentially lethal poison. Soon, the Secret Service and the FBI put the pieces together. There was a man whose alarming online rants were always signed off with the message, "I am Kevin Curtis and I approve this message." A man who'd harassed Senator Wicker about a conspiracy to smuggle human body parts and who'd been sentenced to jail by Sadie Holland 10 years earlier. Only a day after receiving the poison letters, as he was pulling out of his driveway with his little dog Moo Cow, Curtis was swarmed by men in tactical gear carrying heavy weapons. He was hauled out of his car and Moo Cow bolted down the street. They cuffed him and drove him 90 minutes to their facility where he was interrogated while they searched his home. When told about the arrests, family and friends and neighbors all agreed that, yeah, he probably did that shit, yeah. The feds told Curtis that they knew what he'd done. He'd made the ricin and tried to kill the President of the United States. No, he told them, "I don't even eat rice. And where's Moo Cow?" And they told him, "Fuck Moo Cow. You tried to kill the president. You're going to jail for the rest of your life." But after 7 hours of interrogation, they started suspecting that this unstable Elvis impersonator might not be their man. Either he was deviously clever, or he truly had no fucking clue what was going on. And most significantly, they had nothing to tie him to the letters. No DNA, no trace of ricin anywhere, no chemical lab. And finally, they just asked him, "Hey man, is there anybody who might try to frame you for something like this?" And yes, there was. A man named James Everett Dusky. The feds started covertly staking out Dusky's place, but he was safe. Any true sensei knows that you don't make ricin at the home or in your 1998 Grand Caravan. You do that shit at the dojo. But on April 27th, he finally slipped up, and the feds caught him red-handed, disposing of a mask behind his dojo which tested positive for ricin. Curtis was freed, and Dusky was locked up as more and more incriminating evidence stacked up against him. Curtis got his life back and tracked down his dog Moo Cow, who wound up at the local shelter. And though he got plenty of wayward looks for his involvement in the bizarre tale, he was smugly satisfied with the way that his nemesis had been hoisted by his own petard. Mensa membership or not, Curtis had come out on top. And when Dusky was sentenced to 20 years in prison for sex crimes and 25 years for a trio of assassination attempts, Curtis's victory was made complete. Now, to be fair, these weren't really serious assassination attempts. A layman can't just take some castor beans from eBay and make lethal ricin. If by chance Obama had opened up a letter from some random guy in Mississippi and been like, "This smells weird. Here, Michelle, come smell this. Oh yeah, that's some weird shit." Yeah, even then, I don't know that he would have even gotten sick. Now, I don't know if he knew it wasn't dangerous, but at any rate, they sentenced him like he meant it. A nice little coda to this story is that 6 months later, from prison, Dusky was caught trying to do it again. He tried to convince an acquaintance to forge more letters framing Curtis again. At some point, his fixation on Curtis had become a delusional obsession, and he just could not shake it. The story got plenty of attention nationally, and Kevin Curtis probably enjoyed the spotlight. For a little while, he toured the circuit of B-list daytime talk shows, and his newfound novelty landed him some gigs. He promised to write a book and started working on a documentary on the story, but neither ever materialized. Eventually, people stopped caring, and he returned to anonymity, just a guy with one of the strangest resumes in the Elvis game. He spent several years trying to sue Dusky and the federal government, but nothing much ever came out of that, and best I can tell nowadays, he's just doing his thing, performing as Elvis, and crusading against illegal corpse harvesting. The final little tidbit of this story is this comment that Curtis put on a petition that somebody in Dusky's camp posted online back in 2021, titled, quote, "Indict Fauci, Free Dusky," arguing that Anthony Fauci framed Dusky and then created the coronavirus or something like that. I'm not reading all this shit. Curtis's comment supports the endeavor, saying that, quote, "It is highly probable that Dusky was framed because of his political stand and his online activity exposing former state representative Steve Holland of various discrepancies." And then he says some stuff about how Holland was illegally stealing bones and organs and stuff. So I guess after all these years, they squashed the beef, because now I guess Curtis thinks Dusky is innocent of the whole thing. Shit, maybe he is. What do I know? Maybe, just maybe, after endless warfare for thousands of generations, these two wayward warriors have finally made peace. Or maybe we're just sitting on the precipice of the conflict being born anew.